And if you really want to live the life you truly want, it takes intention and it takes planning.
That's probably a message that you have for people is like, once you make this shift and you want to start, not only releasing from the golden cage, but building something, that is in support and in alignment with the things that matter most.
My name is Nick Hutchison of Book Thinkers.
Hi, this is Dr. Oz Garcia.
This is John Lee.
My name is Dr. Wendy Suzuki.
Hey, this is Richard Dolan.
This is Jason Pfeiffer.
This is Todd Herman.
My name is Georgia Clare.
This is Nir Ayal.
My name is Chris Bailey.
And this podcast
makes sense. It's so true. And, it took me about 8 years to get to where I'm at with this podcast, and I got the book. But I'm sitting here, I'm working hard, but it's about a 20-hour work week to run this. And I mean, it's intense and I'm all in, but I've got that 30 hours. And had I not have that 30 hours, because, you and I are like two women having their menstrual cycle at the same time or something, because, I've got a huge project coming that is going to make this podcast look like, a Betty Crocker oven. That's something that, just to your point, that, it started with an idea, but I was able to execute and put the work in and start that process because I had that time. So I love that. I was never interested in just working 20 hours a week and just fiddling my thumbs. I like to work, but I love this idea of legacy, leaving a footprint and things like that, and mattering, like you were saying before. You've said several times that, this concept of the lies that we've been taught, that most dangerous lies, I heard you say this once, that most dangerous lies don't look like lies, so what I'd love you to speak about, why is that? But also, where does that come from? Where do the success lies come from? Are we talking, because this could get a little bit personal, but is this culture? Is this school? Is it family? Is it religion? What have you found out about that?
Well, at the basis of all of that is ignorance. I think some of it is diabolical and on purpose. And I think our enemy, scripture talks about it, the enemy is like a roaring lion seeking to devour us. There is an active enemy element that, Satan is working actively to destroy us. And so there are lots of lies, and that can be seen in how government operates and how leadership goes throughout the world. But a lot of it is just ignorance, plain ignorance. When my parents taught me about money, for example, they taught me what they knew. They didn't know a lot about it. That is not to disrespect my parents. They've done quite well for themselves, and they're doing well now. But they didn't know what they didn't know. And so what they translated to me was only the limited amount they had to know, which handicapped me, because once I became an entrepreneur, what they taught me when I was in ministry and what they taught me as a school teacher, that all worked. But when I became an entrepreneur, the rules changed. Right. The rules are very different when you're in business for yourself. I mean, you look at the tax code. The tax code is, that thick, and maybe 10% of it is about, what taxes are and how to pay it. The rest is, as a business owner, how not to pay it. Like most of what they taught me was from an employee's perspective. Now, did they do it on purpose? No. Could they have done better? I'm sure all parents could have probably done better, but they did what they could. So it's ignorance. So where are these lies coming from? I think it's ignorance, but some of it's absolutely diabolical. I think we're being lied to by our government constantly about everything. I don't think there's a single thing. I think the news, what I would say about the news, it doesn't matter which one it is, right, left, center, it doesn't matter. They're all messengers of Satan. There is nothing about that is redeemable. It is all bad. I don't think you could ever look at any of that and say that's good. There's nothing good about it. Chase Hughes, who I follow on Instagram and YouTube, if you haven't seen him, you should look him up. Yeah. One of the things that I saw, he said, if you see something like that and somebody says, hey, have you seen this? Did you see what Trump just did? Did you see what's happening in Iran? Did you see what's happening in Israel? He says, this is how you don't go nuts with this. Your answer is always, maybe. That's it. Like, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. I'm going to be on the side of it probably didn't, but maybe, because we're being lied to. And if we just are gullible and we take all this stuff in and we don't filter it through, I would rather be called a conspiracy theorist or crazy and ultimately be found out to be wrong than to be one who just goes along with everything and ultimately found out to be wrong. I'd rather be on the side of, well, I'm a little skeptical about it. I don't think that's probably true. And let's just see how it shakes out. And if it shakes out to where that person was right, okay, no harm, no foul. But I think we've been lied to out of ignorance. And I also think we're being lied to actively. But I also say this, if the lie looked like a lie, we wouldn't believe it. I mean, if an intruder shows up to your house to steal all your stuff and he's got the black thing on and, it's got the mask and he's got a gun and he opens the door and he says, I'm going to come in and steal your stuff, we'd fight. That's not how they show up. Somebody who wants to steal your stuff usually shows up with a cloned voice. Hey, mom, I'm in jail. Can you send me money? Like, it always looks like it's true. So lies look like truth. The cage looks like something you want to live in. And once you figure out it's all a lie and it ain't what you want, sometimes it's too late.
I love this. I love the correlation to all the stuff that I talk about with the interface response system because, one of the primary things that we teach or that I discovered that I pay forward is that if you want things in your life to change, you have to change the way you look at them, so that requires, and this is what's so fascinating about all this stuff. I think that everything has a purpose, including lies, including Satan, everything. There's no light without dark. My saying, people say, how are you doing, JC? I go, it's all good. And that's everything, that's just the way I choose to go through life. But we just have to realize that we're allowed to give ourselves permission to say, interesting. You just that's right. You reminded me of a quick story. I was sitting at an airport and just waiting for my flight. I had a delayed flight. So I was sitting at the bar. I don't drink much, typically only if I'm with Jason, but
I only drink when I'm with you.
But I was sitting there and there was this lady next to me yelling and screaming not at me, but she was in a conversation with me and I never invited her to. I had no idea who she was. And she was way ahead of me with drinking. And she was referencing what was going on the TV. And it was Trump was talking. I wasn't paying attention to it because it's not interesting to me. But she was just blah, 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 blah. And she obviously didn't like him. And she's cussing and swearing and all that stuff. And to your point, just like Chase Hughes, who I love, he's amazing. She said at the end of her 15-minute rant, she goes, right. And I looked at her. I'm like, oh, it's my turn to talk now. And I said, right, what? And she goes, him. And I go, what about him? And she's like, he's a beep, 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 beep. And I just said, oh, I don't know. I've never met him. Same point, listen, you're just completely hypnotized by an outside force right now that may or may not be true. I guess what I want to know now, so I think we've moved people into this space where they're entertaining this stuff. I think that the number one goal people need to set is to just allow themselves to be open and curious about everything, including your thoughts and everything your mother, father, teacher, preacher taught you and what the TV's telling you. You're allowed to say, about that and not make your mind up so fast. People need to recognize that that is an option. And I think people are afraid to do that. But my question to you is, when somebody begins rethinking wealth and money, because that's what we're inviting people to do, whether they change their mind or not, we're just inviting that we're creating this space where people can rethink things and say, what is the first step that they should take when they start rethinking money?
I think you need to start reading and then exploring it for yourself. I had an interesting long conversation with, I don't often use ChatGPT anymore, but yesterday I was in the car and it was just easier to have a back and forth conversation. Yesterday was tax day. I know that this will be released later, but just about this idea that some people believe that federal income tax is not required. So I thought, I'm on my way to the post office to drop off my check of theft to the government. So I'm like, okay, where is what does the research say? So I just had this long conversation and it was interesting. We're not here to discuss what I discovered there, but it was interesting. Also, there are other resources that you can look into about money. I read one of the most fascinating books about money that I ever read is The Creature from Jekyll Island. Have you read this? You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Yeah. So The Creature from Jekyll Island, for those that don't know, Jekyll Island, Georgia is, I think it's Georgia, South Carolina, Georgia. Anyway, is the island where these big, powerful people in 1913 went and have ultimately designed what we now call the Federal Reserve System and how it changed money forever, not only in our country, but everywhere. And it just is a historical account of what was decided, what happened after the fact, the repercussions of those decisions, and what's happened since. And I'm telling you, money isn't what you think it is. Money does not operate the way you think that it does. If you can imagine playing a board game with somebody, let's say, JC, you and I get together, we're going to play a board game and our wives are with us. There's 4 of us playing this board game. I have read all the rules. I know every one of the rules, but when I sit down to explain it to the 3 of you, I only give you some of the rules. And so we go through the game. Who's going to win the game? I'm winning the game. Why? Because I know the rules. So when we look around and we look at money and we look at wealth and we see some people with and a lot of people without, you think that we're playing by the same rules and we're not.
Right.
They know things we don't know. Are they cheating? Absolutely. Well, I would suppose some of them are, of course, but are they cheating? No, they're just playing by rules that we haven't yet uncovered, that nobody sat down and talked to us. I joined an organization about 6 or 7 years ago. That's whole point of being is to explain how money and generational wealth actually works.
Right.
And I'm 7 years in and I still feel like I'm in kindergarten. I still feel like, holy crap. I mean, I've learned so much more about money. Now, have I made mistakes? Have I screwed things up? Yeah. Am I worth $100 million? Not yet. But I'm learning that the rules around money aren't what we think they are. And it's not that the other people are cheating. It's just we just haven't learned all the rules yet. So I think it's so fascinating to see people scream things like the rich should pay their fair share. What does that even mean?
Right.
Do you even know what you're saying? Do you have any idea what those words strung together into one sentence actually mean? No. You're just looking at they have more than you, so you think they're cheating. No. Now, again, I will concede that some people are crooks, but that's not what we're talking about. Those are anomalies. What we're talking about is that they're playing by a different set of rules. So books like The Creature from Jekyll Island will give you some insight into that. I'm actually finishing for the first time the book Thou Shalt Prosper by Daniel Lapin. I don't know if you've heard of that book, or written in the early 2000s. He's a Jewish rabbi, and he wrote the 10 Commandments of how money works, and all from a Jewish perspective. And holy crap, dude. I was listening to it this morning when I was exercising. I was riding my bike, and he defined what money is. And I need to go back and listen to it again because I'm going to screw up this definition. But he said something about money is a marker of the value of your relationships, something like that. Because those who are providing value in relationships tend to have more money than those who do not. And you may say, well, yeah, my mom was the best person in the world and she never had any money. Listen, we're not talking about the value of the relationship in your own little circle. It's like, how wide does that go out? Because money is a global thing. And anyway, we could riff on this money thing forever, because money's fake. It's not what we think it is. It is a value that we've placed that there's nothing behind it. And we've got to work within that system. And if we learn the rules that those people are playing that have more than us, that's the only way we're going to get more.
You know me well, and I'm a big fan of the simulation hypothesis and gamifying the world and everything like that. So what I love so much about crypto is this whole idea of like digital currency just is very much similar to the currency that we all knew before, because, you know, I agree with you. I'm on, at this time, I'm on the same page that it's like, you know, just this, it's not what everybody thinks. But what's interesting to me, it's hard for somebody to untether, you know, from the conditioning, because we've got somebody listening right now that can hear the way I'm hearing you speak is logical, it's rational, it's worth taking a look at. But there's some people listening to this right now that are saying this guy's lost his mind, because we live in a world where people put exclamation points behind sentences. And I always say, why don't you try saying that same sentence with a question mark? And they're not willing to do it. They're not willing to do it. So I think that it's a fear thing. Like it's not that they're afraid of finding out, you know, that you're right and they're wrong. It's finding out that their identity has been based on a lie. So is there a risk of waking up to these lies that you're talking about without having a grounded truth to replace them? Because I think that's what people are afraid of.
Yeah, well, that's the magic, right? The magic is if you discovered the lie, then you shouldn't just say, well, hey, I discovered the lie. You should also now be in pursuit of the truth. Because if you find out the lie is a lie, okay, well, then what is the logical conclusion of that? Well, then what is in fact truth? So if the lie is that money has value, that's a lie, which I happen to believe that money has no value. But if the lie is money has no value, well, what does have value? Where is the value? So you need to pursue the truth. So if you find out that taxation, there's a lie in taxation, or you find that there's a lie in the way government operates, or you find there's a lie in the way relationships work in marriage or parenting, it's not just enough. It's really not cool just to be the cynic. Nobody likes that person. Nobody likes the person who's always cynical. Well, you can become cynical really quickly if you start uncovering these lies. Like, holy crap, all this is wrong. Everything's wrong. Oh, it's all wrong. Well, that's fine. But now it's time to pursue the truth. So there's lies that you believe, and then there's truths that you don't. So it's two sides. So pursue the truth. And in the process, you're going to discover you've been lied to. Those things have to balance out.
So fascinating. I talk all the time about being open and curious. That's why I wear this hat. It's not to just dispute things, but it reminds me, because it stands for I haven't made up my mind. It reminds me that I don't have to make up my mind about anything. You know, like I could take what we're talking about right now and run with it, but I'm going to remain open to finding out that there's even a better way. You know what I mean? Like when we find something we like that aligns with us, and it's also working. And you made a good point before that some of the things that you might now look back at as living a lie worked for you at the time. You know, that's part of the journey. And I love the way you talk like that. But I think the goal is to just remain open open and curious. Here's an interesting question I had down for you. What's one belief about success that you would challenge people to question immediately about themselves right now?
One belief about success that I would have people challenge, that there's one definition of it, that there's one measurement. In the United States, in Western culture, so you can include other countries in that, but we typically look at someone, if we say, oh, he is successful or she's successful, what does that generally mean? They're probably driving a very nice car, live in a nice house, have extra money. That's somehow we've come to conclude that that is successful. But we don't look at someone who has, enough money, right? And maybe they drive decent cars and live in a decent house and have a decent amount of money to spend, tremendously great, deep relationships with family members and friends, and they throw parties at their homes and they are involved in their communities. We don't generally look at that person and say, wow, they're successful. We generally look at them and say, wow, they're a good family man, or they've got good friends, but we don't call it success. So I think one thing that we would challenge is this universal definition of success that doesn't exist. In the first 354 episodes of my podcast, The Root of All Success, which you were a guest on, I asked every single guest what their definition of success was. And there were lots of definitions of success that fell into about 6 different categories. And the one that was probably the most universally repeated was that success is being able to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, where you want, as often as you want, which kind of lends this idea of freedom, right? The freedom and the ability to choose. And I think that is probably the closest definition to success that we could probably say universally fits everybody. But in fact, that still doesn't do it, because there are people who work their 40 hours for the company for 40 years that do really well in terms of relationships and giving back to their communities, and they exercise their gifts, and they have good talents, and they're just nice, great people that are also tremendously successful, but they don't have the freedom that other definition also describes. So I think when we get to the end of this life and the opportunity to look back at everything and we take the tinted glasses off and finally see everything as it is, I think we're probably all going to be way more surprised than we expect.
Well, that's why your friend has glasses with no lenses, because I recognized that I was being persuaded in many, many ways. So kind of in closing, I want to first of all say that I know Jason very well. He's a great friend, and he's a man of character, and he's a humble guy that is very, very passionate to a fault at helping people sometimes. We had his wife come on here right now. But why did you feel compelled to create this guy, the real Jason Duncan, and focus specifically on exposing these lies? What made you decide to do that? That's what I want to know.
This is probably a long part of the conversation, but I'll try to shorten it as much as possible. In the early 20 teens, I got on Instagram. And when I got on Instagram, you had to pick your own handle. And Jason Duncan was already taken by somebody else named Jason Duncan. And so I had to pick something else. So I picked the real Jason Duncan. Just no rhyme or reason behind it. Just needed something. I didn't want underscores, dots, dashes, numbers. Didn't want any of that stuff. So I did that. And that was it. Fast forward many years later, my company's very successful. I'm doing YouTube videos, and I'm on Instagram, and I'm doing some stuff, but not under a personal brand as the real Jason Duncan, just doing it. And that happened to be my handle. And a lady on LinkedIn reached out to me. She was a personal branding coach, expert, whatever. And she said, I would love to do a free 30-minute personal branding assessment for you. And I was like, sure. And I remember I was sitting on the front porch of my house having coffee. It was in the morning. I kind of think it was on a Saturday. But anyway, she called and she did her 30-minute consult with me. And at the end, she said, I've looked at all your social medias. I've looked at everything you're writing about, all that you do. And here's what I notice. You post lots of pictures of you in an RV and with your dog and with your wife and with your kids, smoking cigars and riding motorcycles, business stuff from time to time. And it seems to me it's just to be real authentic. It's real. Yeah. She goes, you're the real Jason Duncan. I said, I don't understand what you mean. And she said, no. That is your personal brand. You're real. You're the real Jason Duncan. And you should just lean into that. And I thought, oh, okay. So I went and bought therealjasonduncan.com and had a logo designed, and that was it. And at first I didn't really know what to do with it. I was like, okay, I got a personal brand. And then as I discovered over time, just like what you've asked me in this question, is that it's a little more memorable than just some guy named Jason Duncan who shows up to speak at an event or wrote a book. It's the real Jason Duncan. People are like, well, that's weird. What does that mean? And I get get to answer the question. So that's where it all starts. The second part of that question is, well, how did I get to this place where I want to help, expose the lies people believe and the truths they don't, and talk about this golden cage? Well, last Thursday night, I'm sitting at a hotel in Pensacola, Florida. I'm on the sidewalk outside in the parking lot, smoking a cigar, and I have my laptop, and I'm working on Claude, and I'm hanging out. I'm just doing stuff. And I had been on Instagram earlier that day and saw a post about Seth Godin. He says, have Claude can act like Seth Godin to design your personal brand. I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. So it had like 6 or 8 prompts in a row of what it could do. And I had already leaned into rebranding myself around, rather than being an exit coach, which I am, and that's what I do in my Exeter Club Mastermind, but it pigeonholes me too much, and people think that's all I ever want to talk about. And that's frankly very little of what I talk about. I talk about this other stuff like what you and I have been talking about. And so I'd already kind of rebranded around the lies you believe and the truths you don't. That had already kind of started. And so by Thursday night, I'm now running Claude through these prompts, these Seth Godin type prompts. And Seth Godin has this thing called the purple cow. Do you know what I'm talking about? So he's talking about this idea that his kid said, well, it'd be kind of funny if there was a purple cow. And Seth's point about the purple cow was it's a visual that you can see that's remarkable and everybody can understand it. And he said, everybody needs a purple cow. Everybody needs something in their brand. It's a visual, a graphic visual explanation of what the brand is about. And I didn't have one. I was like, I don't know what that would be. The lies you believe and the truths you don't doesn't immediately have a visual. And I started working through and processing it with Claude, and ultimately out pops the golden cage. I said, that's what this is. That's what you're talking about. And it's something you can immediately see in your mind's eye. And so I actually took that information, and this is 1 week old, not even a week. It'll be a week old tonight. I took that information, reran it back through all of my personal branding kind of database, everything I've built, and inserted it just where it made sense. Because it wasn't changing the brand. It was sharpening the point on what it is that I talk about. So the gold is the lie. The golden cage is the illustration. And then my story is the golden cage that I built $1 million successful business and couldn't sell it. It was worthless.
That's so funny. And I know it's such a powerful visual and tool because, when we were talking before we started, I was like, did you make that up? Because it sounds like something I've heard before. That's how good it is. I'm 54 and I feel like I've always known about the golden cage. I just didn't know it was called the golden cage. I love that. I think that for me, if I ever had the opportunity to get coached by Seth Godin like you have, I would say it's my that's the thing that everybody cracks up. Or what I want to say about Jason, I had the opportunity to come speak at one of his events and meet all of his clients, and they all loved him, and like he's dedicated himself to not only helping these people stop living lies and live extraordinary lives, but he's got their families in his hands. He takes it very seriously what he does. But every single one of them, I went around because Jason's a friend of mine, and I just went around saying like, how did you find Jason? And they all tell the same exact story. They said, I read his book and then I reached out to him. Give my audience just a quick little snippet about, as we close out, what the book is about and how they can get it.
So the book is called Exit Without Exiting. And it's about how to begin living the exit lifestyle much sooner than you ever thought possible without having to sell your business. Right. And so it walks through not only my story about what I did going from, the $1 million business that was unsellable to figuring out how to get out of the weeds of daily operation and allow my team to run it. And I didn't have to be there. But it also tells the story of 3 other characters, an Edward, Cheryl, and a James. And it walks through their stories of how they approached building a business. Edward is the prototypical entrepreneur, hustle and grind, didn't have any plan. And then when he went to exit, he found himself in an earnout. And it got stuck in it for another 3 to 5 years working for somebody else in his own company. Cheryl, on the other hand, she put in a decade worth of hustle and grind and sold her business for multi-millions, like life-changing money. But then at the closing table realizes, wow, I missed a decade of my daughter's life. Like I don't get that back. And for what? To exchange it for the gold? Well, the gold was the lie. And then down the third story is James. James is the entrepreneur who did the exit without exiting methodology. From day one, he started thinking, I need to plan this business in a way that doesn't require me to be here. The business will be worth more. And then you kind of walk him through his story where he didn't have as much money as Cheryl, still had a better life than both Cheryl and Edward. He's living the absolute dream in his business. Now, what's interesting about that book is that I'm in the process. I've already written it. It's being edited right now by a major publisher. I'm hopefully, by next year, it'll be ready to release again. But I'm going to release an updated and revised version of it. Not only am I going to tell a little little bit more of each of their stories, but I'm going to tell what happened after James finally sold the business. And so it's coming. So Exit Without Exiting Revisited, hopefully will drop sometime in Q1 of 27.
That's awesome. And when you read the book, you'll probably resonate with one of those people. That's a powerful place to be. Highly recommend everything that Jason does. So my brother, thanks so much for being here. This was great. This was refreshing. And, I was taking notes myself, and I have some things to think about as well and maybe talk to you about. And I can't wait for part 3, because who knows what the real Jason Duncan is. But I just secured a URL while we were talking called The Fake JC Doornick. If this conversation hits something for you, if you're starting to question the path that you've been on, that's not confusion. That's awareness. That's a good thing. And awareness is the first step to breaking free. Make sure that you check Jason Duncan out at therealjasonduncan.com. Do me a favor, hit subscribe and like the video if you're vibing with this. It helps us reach more people who need to hear this message. Share this with a friend and comment with a topic that you might want to hear in future episodes. I want to make sure that we're talking about things that matter most to you.
Makes sense.